This video is brought to you by Babcock Canada, Canada's industry partner leading the in-service support on the Victoria-class submarines. Babcock stands ready to deliver an all-encompassing, purpose-built, and sovereign sustainment solution that will meet our nation's defense and economic needs for generations to come.
Hey everybody, welcome to Go Bold. My name is Joetey Atariwala and I'm your host. And I'm coming to you today from Canadian Forces Base Esquimalt in British Columbia. And I'm joined with Rear-Admiral Chris Robinson, the senior most submariner in the Canadian Armed Forces, I believe, not just in the Navy.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. And so today I thought we would chat all about submarines from the senior most expert in the country. Admiral, thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, my pleasure.
Really, really lovely to be here. Thank you for allowing us to come into your space. It's a lovely office. So, as I do with all of my guests, I start out by asking what made you join the military and what made you pick the branch that you did?
So I grew up in Western Quebec, just off the West Island of Montreal. Grew up on a dairy farm. And I went to school to study accounting. So I have a Bachelor of Commerce as my undergraduate degree. And at some point as I was going through school, I saw a movie called Das Boot.
Yes.
Super cool.
Yes, absolutely.
And one thing led to another. So when I graduated with my Bachelor of Commerce, I applied to the Navy and to be a submariner and joined the Navy and followed that career path. So I really joined it because of a movie. That's a superficial answer. Of course, growing up on a dairy farm, my worldview was fairly short, right? Because
Sure.
you had to milk the cows morning and afternoon, so you didn't go long distances away from home.
Right.
I wanted to see the world. And joining the Navy is the easiest way to see the world. I recommend it to everyone. Join the Navy, see the world. It's true, and I have seen the world, so that's why I joined the Navy.
That's fantastic. And then what prompted you to pursue a career or focus in the submarine community?
So when I joined the Navy, at the time you went through the normal career progression. So I served on minesweepers and destroyers and built my career that way, always with a view to get into submarines. And I went submarines at the earliest junction. So in my case, it was I went as a sub-lieutenant into submarines. And I sort of thought at the time that I would do it for a couple of years and then I would go do a bunch of other things, the sort of bounce around, change jobs, experience different things. It was the people. It was the sense of family. It was the connection that you build. So the people that I served in my first submarine with, some of them are still my friends today and my closest friends. We just spent our careers together and it felt like a family to me. So as I got to various career gates, and at the time you used to compete for your contract renewals. And 70%, 75% would get them and the rest weren't. Mm-hmm. So I'm a competitive person by nature, so I always had my file in so that I could be extended and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Those days are now past. But I guess I got to a point where I sort of realized this is my career. This is what I'm going to do with my life, is I'm going to be a submariner. I wanted to command a submarine, not always, but within a few years of starting in submarines, I realized that was something that appealed to me. And I really thought that would be the highlight of my career, if you will. That was 20 years ago. And it truly was the highlight of my career. But, I ended up going on and doing other things after that, but always with a focus on submarines. And I served in submarines until 2019.
Fantastic. Well, and to become you were the commanding officer of HMCS Corner Brook.
I was, yeah.
Before you get there, you have to do this kind of milestone event for a command opportunity, and that is the Perisher course. Tell me a little bit about where you did that.
So I did Perisher in Norway. So Perisher is the commanding officer course. It was developed in the United Kingdom in the middle of World War I. Up until that, so submarines were very new in World War I. They'd really been a force to reckon with for less than a decade at that point. And the way you learned it was an apprenticeship. You started as a sub-lieutenant and you worked your way up, and at some point you got command of your own boat. In the rigors of combat and the loss rate that they were experiencing, they needed to better prepare people. So Perisher comes from the word periscope, and it was the periscope school. And back then, most warfare was done by the visual eye. So you looked at a target, you estimated the range, course, and speed, and then you conducted a torpedo attack. So that ability to effectively do that mental math and keep the submarine safe, get an effective torpedo attack in, was key to survival. So they created the periscope school. The people that went through the periscope school was shortened to perishers, and that course has run continuously since 1917. A number of nations were involved in it. So the United Kingdom started it, but the Norwegians attended it all the way through until the 60s or 70s, and then they started running their own course, but linked together. They do the sea phase is done together, some of the shore phase is done together, and all that kind of stuff. It's all done in the same geographic area. Later, the Norwegians, the Dutch, started running a course as well. So there's 3 perishers that run together, all in the Firth of Clyde, all doing the same exercise, attacking each other, using the same ships and aircraft as opposition force.
Okay.
So I did the Norwegian one.
Interesting. And so, just for interest's sake, which submarine were you on when you did that?
So I did a number of them, but I was primarily on the Eula.
Eula.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And so then, since clearly you passed and you became commanding officer of HMCS Corner Brook, must have been like a highlight of your career.
It was a super amazing highlight. I was very blessed to take over from a close friend, Jamie Clark. I took command of the submarine in Europe while the boat was deployed and launched into a very busy couple of years. So we were in Europe, we were in northern waters, up in the icebergs and all that kind of stuff, which was a kind of a wild place to operate.
Sure.
Down in the Caribbean, like all over the Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Arctic.
Wow.
A couple hundred days of sea time later, I sadly turned it over to another close friend, Alex Coinman, who is the current commander of the Submarine Force. So it's a very small world. We all know each other. That perisher qualification, 60 Canadians have achieved it since 1914.
That all?
That's it.
Wow.
So not a lot.
Right, yeah. Oh my God. Well, I'm awesome. Very cool that you're in that niche group. Absolutely.
There are 6 serving members of the armed forces that are perisher qualified today.
That's it.
That's
6.
it. Yeah.
Wow. Holy smokes. Okay. We will certainly get to the current class, and then eventually we'll talk about the program to replace the current Victoria class. But I'd like to start by asking you about the importance of submarines. And I think it's also important to talk about the underwater domain and why it is important. Perhaps we can talk about, what are the key threats and opportunities that also exist in the underwater domain?
Okay. I think I'll frame this by talking about what navies do and then sort of branch from there.
Sure.
So plus or minus, there is a theory created by a British academic by the name of Ken Booth that there's a trinity of roles for navies. And he did a bunch of statistical analysis and figured out that navies over their history have done fighting at sea, so war fighting at sea, if you will, constabulary, so law enforcement at sea, think fisheries, counter drugs, that kind of stuff, and naval diplomacy. And that is the act of going into someone else's waters, doing exercises with them, hosting parties on board the ship. The convening power of a warship in someone's port with the big flag flying, people just want to come down and see it. And a lot of trade deals and diplomatic breakthroughs happen on the decks of warships, Canadian warships in our case. So those are the 3 main roles. No single platform can achieve all of those things. So submarines are the alpha predators of the sea, but they're not really good at constabulary ops, not doing a lot of counter-piracy and that kind of things with submarines, although they can do it. They're not ideal for it. So you need a balanced fleet. Convoy escorts across the Atlantic, for example. Submarines weren't really great at that. Surface ships are. So you need a fleet that can deal with all of that. Something that can take out missiles, something that can take out aircraft, something that can fight ships, so on and so forth. Where submarines excel is really in 2 areas. They, bar none, are the most effective thing at hunting other submarines and hunting ships. So that's the warfighting role. They're also really effective at intelligence gathering, indications and warning, recce, that kind of stuff. Because people act, and countries are analogous to people, act differently when they don't think they're being watched or listened to. So if you put a submarine in someone's waters, they don't know it's there, and you gather intelligence, you have a sense of what they're going to do, and it allows decision makers to make different decisions, to influence activities. So those two roles, warfare, anti-submarine warfare in particular, and gathering intelligence, I would say, are the two primary roles. But for a nation to be able to defend its home waters, nothing is more effective than a submarine, because it covers a vast territory. If you don't know where it is, it can be anywhere.
Right, right.
So if you need to go into someone else's waters, you need to expend a much larger force to find that submarine and contain it than you would against any other kind of platform. So for that reason, submarines are invaluable. Any blue water navy would need them.
Right, right. And the underwater domain is growing in importance because, Canada is a country rich in natural resources. But it seems like now, globally, natural resources are being harvested from under the water as well.
Yeah. And one of the resources that we don't often talk about is internet connectivity.
Right.
So much of the world's information passes through subsea cables. There's an acronym, because of course militaries operate an acronym, so CUI, Critical Undersea Infrastructure, but it refers to telephone cables, internet cables, that whole subsea connectivity link that the world operates on. I was telling some friends, so I live here in the dockyard. I have a gorgeous view of Constance Bank and the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and there is a ship just outside of my window right now as we're doing this interview that is offloading some kind of aggregate, possibly gravel, possibly whatever, doesn't matter.
Right.
That ship is a Canadian-owned ship. It's flagged in the Bahamas. It was built in South Korea. It is carrying a cargo from Mexico to here, and it's offloading into American barges. That is the international rules-based order. That is, people are working together because they're confident that they will deliver their product, they will get paid, and that it will be safe. That's what navies exist to protect. That whole flow of international trade from one country to another, using crews from one place, ships built somewhere else, so on and so forth. That's what navies primarily protect. And the undersea part of that is growing in importance. It's mining, catches a lot of attention, but that critical undersea infrastructure, pipelines are another example. We've seen several examples of that in the North Sea recently.
Yes.
All of that's critical underwater infrastructure. It's vulnerable, it needs to be protected, and the most effective way to protect it is to be in that water column with a submarine.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the beautiful thing about submarines being stealthy is you don't know if they're there or if they're not there.
Precisely.
But you have to presume they're there.
Precisely.
Right.
And we see, just linked to that without going way off track, a lot of information is available on the internet today. So every ship over a certain size transmits on something called an automatic identification system, AIS for short.
Right.
And that is received by satellites. It is disseminated. There are a number of open source. You can Google it and you can find out, where a ship is, what speed it's doing, where it's headed, what cargo's on board. All that information. I talked about the ship that is just out sea, and it's the Canadian Steamship Line Frontier. I know that because I Googled that online. I could tell where it was built, who built, like all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But that all relies on that being true.
Correct.
You have a AIS transmitter in your ship. You plug in whatever information you want. That is transmitted. And for a long time, it was just accepted as being the truth. If you received an AIS report that said this was that ship doing this thing, people realized that you could spoof it, or you could enter false information or whatever. And there was a couple of open source cases of that just very recently, not here, where they found out that the ships transmitting information were being untruthful. And the whole dark fleets that are trading in illicit goods right now rely on that. It's one of the bread and butter activities of any submarine. Every ship that they pass, they receive the AIS information, they look at what the name is on the ship, they look at what the ship's doing, and they compare the two, and then they transmit that home. That is something that submarines do day in and day out, and it's an important part of that international rules-based order.
It's so funny that you said that because I had the great fortune and privilege to go aboard HMCS Corner Brook, your
My old boat.
yeah, your old boat, out here in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and we submerged, and it was a wonderful experience. But the commanding officer at the time, Commander Eric Isabel, had mentioned to us that that they were doing exactly that. That they were surveilling some ships and reporting back certain things, and it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. You know, if somebody can spoof AIS, well, how do you then verify exactly who they are? You know, you have to have eyes on.
You've got to have eyes on.
Yeah. Really, really interesting. So, you know, here we are in Esquimalt, British Columbia. Beautiful weather right now.
Nicest place in the world, just in case anyone's interested. This is the nicest place in the world.
I echo that 100%. 100%. But, you know, the Canadian Navy is a 3-ocean Navy.
It is.
What are some of the specific challenges of operating submarines in Arctic waters?
So I think the first thing that many people don't realize is how far away the Arctic is from here. So, you know, we're just above the U.S. border here, so 49th parallel, plus or minus. The Arctic is a long way away. It is faster to connect to Tokyo than to get to Nanisivik, our naval base in the north, from Esquimalt. So first off, long distances. Second off, there's not a lot of infrastructure north. If you need to fix something, if you need to refuel, if you need to get food, much of that has to be shipped into the north. A lot of it is shipped in by airplanes, and airplanes, very expensive way to ship things and very small quantities, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to resupply a ship in the north. So that is the two biggest factors, long distances and austere operating conditions. A third one is we just don't really know a lot about the ocean bottom in the north.
Sure.
We have not surveyed the whole north, so from a very practical point of view, avoiding running aground is something that you have to be concerned about.
Indeed.
And when I took Corner Brook North in '07 for the first time, a lot of the charts that I was operating on had single lines of sounding. So there was a little ... line that showed you, and they knew that because a ship had gone there and an echo sounder had measured the bottom. As long as you stayed on that line, you knew what the depths were, but you sort of had to extrapolate what everything else was.
Right.
And there are techniques and strategies for dealing with this, but it's a real concern for anyone operating in the north.
Sure.
How uncertain much of the charting is up there. So those are the big things. North of 60 is a maritime protected zone. It's a MARPOL area in technical terms under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, which means you don't discharge anything. And we, you know, the Canadian Navy in particular, we're very sensitive about protecting the environment. Doesn't matter whether we're in a MARPOL zone or not,
Right.
but it takes on increased importance when you're operating in the north. So you need large holding tanks, you need to use environmentally friendly things, and you need to plan to be up there unsupported. So for all of those things, it's a challenge. Many people assume that it's the ice that is the largest challenge, and ice for sure presents a challenge. And even with global warming, what global warming has done is impacted the multi-year ice. So ice that has frozen, gone through a thaw cycle without melting, and then refrozen. And as it goes through those cycles, it becomes harder than concrete. And the whole ice surface that you see generally and people imagine is multi-year ice. First-year ice is a little bit softer. First-year ice still exists much the way it has for forever. It's the multi-year ice that is melting, that is retreating. And as it melts, it doesn't all melt like ice does in your glass of Perrier. It breaks into big chunks of ice, icebergs, if you will.
Sure.
That flows south, and it gets stuck into all the waterways, and you know the archipelago that is the Canadian North rapidly gets blocked up by all this ice. So for the foreseeable future, we will see more ice, not less, in these poorly charted waters. And it will be a challenge to operate in there. And we want ships that are going into our north, like commercial ships, to respect the environment, to not damage things. So having sovereignty up there and protecting that area is ever increasing importance. Where am I going with this from a submarine perspective? It's not so much about going long distances under ice, although that is an important characteristic. It is about the zones close to the ice, we call it the marginal ice zone, where there are these large chunks of ice, where there is some distances of ice, total ice coverage, but operating in that zone, that's where we're going to find other ships, other submarines, and that's where we need to be. Absolutely.
So we are touching on points that have significance to the future Canadian Patrol Submarine Project. Before we get there, I'd like to talk a little bit about what Canada currently has as a setup to talking about the future program. So, you know, the current Victoria class is the current submarine that Canada is operating. We mentioned HMCS Corner Brook, that's one of them. There are 4 in the Navy. What do these submarines do, and how widely have they been used? And you kind of referenced a little bit about that. Yeah.
So in Canada, we've operated submarines on and off since 1914. Submarine service was created here in this harbor on the 5th of August 1914 in the early days of World War I, and we bought 2 submarines that had been built in Seattle. The current class of submarines were built in the late 80s, launched in the late 80s, early 90s, and they were intended to patrol the waters between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, which is where the Soviet submarine fleet would come down from, up over the top and escape into the North Atlantic to threaten Europe and continental America. So they were designed, they have relatively short ranges. They're very quiet. They're designed to hunt other submarines and do anti-submarine warfare barrier patrols. The Cold War ended. The submarines were just coming into service, and these were the first 4 of a planned, much larger class of submarines.
Right.
And so they
originally the Upholder class.
Originally Upholders.
Right.
And they were intended, they were coming in flights, so Flight 1, Flight 2, Flight 3, with incremental improvements. They had just gone through their teething pains. The first one was Upholder, which we renamed Chicoutimi, had about 3 years of service, and they just sort of worked out the initial problems and had them in service. When the decision was made at the end of the Cold War to divest them and to shrink the size of the UK Navy, which they did, it came at the time where we needed to replace the Oberon class. It was an available option. There was as much truth as untruths available floating around at the time that, there was even a British member of Parliament who went on record saying that, they had taken advantage of the Canadians and sold them bad boats and their lemons, and none of that is true. Right. So I was first crew of the first boat. I was of the first 6 Canadians to go over to take Victoria. The boats were good. They were in good shape. They went through a refit process to change a bunch of equipment and have provided relatively good service. There's somewhere between 3,700 sea days in the class since we brought the first one over a little over 25 years ago, or actually just shy of 25 years now. And they've patrolled everywhere. Furthest west one has patrolled is Japan, furthest north is the Arctic, furthest south is Caribbean Basin, and the furthest east would be north of Norway. In that region, Canadian submarines have been very active. Now, one of the things that is not relatively intuitive to everyone is every ship is designed to have a refit cycle of some duration.
Sure.
So it was intended all along that there would be a submarine in refit, a submarine on operations, submarine going into refit, and a submarine coming out of refit. Now, the ones that are going in and out of refit are still operational, and they still do things, but they're either ramping up or ramping down from peak operations, and there's always one in refit. That is often misunderstood because human nature, we compare government finances to our checkbooks. We compare operating ships and submarines to our cars.
Right.
Well, my car doesn't spend a quarter of its time in refit, so why does a ship?
Right.
This is the intended operational cycle for them. There is a bunch of maintenance that needs to be done. There's equipment that needs to be changed, in and out, upgraded, etc. Have we had struggles with that maintenance cycle? For sure. We bought a class of submarines. It's often referred to as an orphan class. The only 4 in the world that are like this are our 4. We took on design authority, so we took on the maintenance, the technical data, the engineering behind everything, and we've struggled to do that. We haven't been really good at it, to be entirely frank. But what it has done is it's allowed us to build an expertise in Canada. So there are people in Canada who are experts in maintaining this class of submarine because they have done it. Private industry has done a lot of it. Public servants do a lot of it. Military members do a lot of it. But between that, all Canadian Team Victoria class, if you will, we've learned how to do it. We also haven't spent anywhere near the kind of money that our allies spend on the maintenance. And in many cases, the less you spend, the less you get. We don't have, like the maintenance, the submarine in refit today doesn't have workers on board 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've elected to spread out that level of work, so it takes significantly longer than it would take if you were running 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
And that gets used as an example of, how poor we are at the maintenance and we don't understand what we're doing because it takes forever. And it does take way too long. And there is room for improvement for sure. But we've done relatively okay. And to segue into the future class, where these lessons have been hoisted in is our new boats, whatever they will be off the shelf. We're not modifying them in any way, shape, or form, which was one of the early mistakes we made with the Victoria class. When we bought the boats, it was called the Submarine Capability Life Extension, which was interpreted as meaning they had to be the same capability as the old ones. So we went into the upholders and we removed capabilities. It was called Canadianization, but it was the sub-harpoon, so a type of missile system was removed as part of Canadianization because the boats they were replacing didn't have harpoon missiles.
Right.
A number of those changes were made for what seemed like reasonable reasons at the time. We're not going to do that in the future. We will take a boat that is built, however it is built, we will operate it the same way, we will take it the same way. But we will also involve Canadian industry right from the get-go, and we will learn how, whoever the supplier is, how they maintain their boats in the parent Navy. That's how we're going to maintain them. We will learn their techniques, their tools, their operating procedures, their engineering, and we will apply it here. It will involve Canadians. We will build a cadre of experts in maintaining these submarines, and that's how we'll go forward.
Yeah, so, a perfect segue into some of my questions about the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project. Canada is looking to acquire up to 12 submarines.
Yep.
Hopefully 12, in my opinion, I hope. And what is your understanding of, and so for point of clarification, you are not part of the submarine project office.
Correct.
But you are knowledgeable. Like, I would,
For sure.
You're certainly a subject matter expert. So what exactly should people be thinking of when it comes to the Canadian Submarine Patrol's project in terms of the scope and how it might differ from the existing Victoria class and how Canada will operate the future submarines on the east and west coast? Because I think it's different from what it exists today.
It is. So in general numbers, Allies experience, our experience, a little bit of math, you need 4 boats to have 1 boat on patrol at any given time. And that was that cycle, we call it an operation cycle, but that was that whole refit, going in, coming out, and on operations arithmetic that I talked about earlier.
Right.
So when we talk about what we need for the future, we say we need 8 or 12. It's not a range of 8 to 12, although if we get 9, then we would make that work or whatever. But
Sure.
8 boats gives you 1 boat continuously in the Atlantic and the Pacific. 12 boats gives you Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic, plus or minus. That's where the arithmetic comes from. So you need to have a sustainment enterprise that is able to maintain a boat on the west and on the east and do those refits, do that training, which is different than how we do it now. So we only have 4 boats right now. They are trained on the East Coast, so all the simulators and that kind of stuff are in Halifax. They're maintained on the West Coast. There's a 4-hour time zone difference between those and many thousands of kilometers. Right. And it has presented a fair number of challenges.
Sure.
In the future, you will see the equivalent on each coast. So you'll have a maintenance yard on each coast. You will have schools, you'll have simulators, you will have trainers, that kind of stuff on both coasts, and that's how we'll go forward.
To me, that speaks about actually being more operationally efficient.
For sure.
Yeah. Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And my understanding is, of the potential bidders that are submitting bids to Canada for their submarines, my understanding is that all of them are proposing submarines that have air-independent propulsion, or AIP. Now, why is that so? And again, you're not in the project office, but why is AIP important?
So air-independent propulsion speaks to the fact that you don't need to have a mast exposed and be bringing air into the submarine to develop electricity and propulsion.
Okay.
So today's submarines, the Victoria class, for example, they run diesel engines, so they put a mast up that brings air in, put another mast up that discharges exhaust. They bring air in, they run diesel engines. It produces alternating current power that is then rectified into direct current power, stored in batteries, and then the batteries feed DC power out, which some is used straight up as DC, some is turned back into AC and feeds various machineries on board.
Simple.
It's super simple. That vulnerability, that putting that mast up, is where you detect the submarine, both from the noise from running the diesel engines, from the radar, seeing the mast above the water. It is detectable from outer space, no less.
Wow.
So it's a real vulnerability, and you want to eliminate as many vulnerabilities as you can when you're operating a submarine. So air-independent propulsion speaks to things like closed-cycle diesel, Stirling engine, if you will, fuel cells, even lithium-ion batteries, which significantly extend the range of the current lead-acid batteries. Those are all possibilities of air-independent propulsion. So why do you need air-independent propulsion? Why has this become the state of the art? It's effectively 2 reasons. One is this reduced vulnerabilities, and 2, when you're operating up near ice, ice is not great for masts that are sticking out of the water, right? Even if you're not under absolute ice coverage, an iceberg snapping off an induction mast is suddenly a very big hole into the submarine. Right. And it is a risk that you want to avoid. So for those two reasons, air-independent propulsion is kind of the state of the art and where everyone's going. There is another air-independent propulsion, nuclear-powered, which is very commonly known. And nuclear power, because it produces so much thermal energy, it effectively provides unlimited power. That's why some allies have gone to nuclear power. I don't think that is necessary for Canada. I think one of the more conventional things would be suitable for us.
And I think it's safe to say that a nuclear-powered boat, that requires a whole nother type of infrastructure, and with that comes cost.
It absolutely does. And I think, if we go back to my earlier comments about a balanced fleet, we can't put all of our eggs in one basket. We need surface ships. They bring a whole host of capability, primarily anti-air and anti-surface, that we need as well. We can't have everything invested into a submarine fleet, much as nuclear capability is, bar none. It is an awesome capability. It just is perhaps more than we need at this time.
Sure. I just have a couple more questions, and that is, we talked about the why AIP exists and why it's important. what else do submarines need to have, like particularly for Canada? What are some other, and I think you actually referenced it a little bit earlier. You were talking about capacity.
Yeah. So really, I guess the most important driver of a capability is the sustainment of it. The ability to maintain it at home, to have experts, to have a supply chain is really what drives the capability. So I will say straight up, the most important thing we need to do is we need to have domestic partnerships. We need to do the maintenance here to sustain that. But more to a platform point of view, to operate up north, you need to have the ability to go under ice, and you need to have the ability not to disturb the environment more than you have to. So large size of a pressure hull both gives you increased buoyancy to break through ice when you need to, and it also gives you the ability to store your waste, your oily water bilge, that kind of stuff needs to be stored on board to the maximum extent that you can. That drives a large submarine. So the submarines will be bigger than the Victoria class, driven primarily by the requirement for longer ranges, duration, ability to endure, and the ability to break through ice. If I could just talk really quickly on ice.
Sure.
It is often talked about, we need nuclear submarines to operate under ice, and the implication is that a nuclear submarine has this tremendous speed and that it smashes through the ice at high speed, and that's
Right.
how it surfaces.
Right.
I just want to say that's not how anyone gets through the ice.
Right. Right.
The way you surface under the ice, you come up, you find a thin patch of ice, we call it Pulnia. You find that with upward-looking sonars, you sort of chart it out, you come to rest underneath it, and then you very softly put air into the tanks and you break through the ice. That is the same for a nuclear submarine, a diesel submarine, an air-independent propulsion submarine. They all surface through ice the same way.
Thank you for that clarification, because I've heard people, and that's one of the things about conversations like this is that my hope is to educate people, viewers, listeners. The other thing that people I've heard talk about is that you shouldn't operate submarines under ice, or that submarines, it's best if you don't operate under ice, so you go up to it and maybe do off platform operations with ROVs or what have you. What do you say to that about operating submarines under ice?
So I guess I would say you need to be able to go under ice the same as you need to be able to go anywhere else. That is a common thing.
Sure.
But there's not a lot under the ice to go in looking for, right? Like, it's only other submarines that are under the ice.
Right.
And they all got under the ice through a fairly known path, right? There's only so many places you can go under the ice because of the depth of water available.
Right.
It's just as effective to sit at those choke points and monitor things going under the ice as it is to go under the ice searching for it. Mm-hmm. The ice creates really difficult conditions because ice underwater, it's like the wind is moving it, the wave is moving it, it's cracking and creaking. It sounds like a Rice Krispies bowl at all times. It's just which makes it hard to find things under the ice.
Sure.
Will there be a time where remotely operated vehicles can go under the ice and do a lot of the searching for us? Of course. But I don't think autonomous vehicles are going to replace crewed platforms, certainly anytime soon. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the human in the loop, the ability to make decisions. When you're faced with a set of circumstances that are different than what you're programmed for, a machine just kind of goes into a do loop trying to figure out, I'm not programmed to deal with this.
Right.
Humans can think their way through it. So that is one factor. The other factor is, unlike a car, when a ship goes to sea or a submarine goes to sea, things routinely break. And they break because they operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because ships are always working. And you need to be able to fix that while you're at sea. So voyage maintenance is an ongoing activity on every ship out there. Autonomous vessels just can't fix themselves, right?
Right, yeah, you still need people.
So the ability to deal with the unknown, the ability to do ongoing voyage repairs, and I hesitate to mention it, but the third real thing is you need a human in the loop if you're making lethal decisions. We certainly don't want to get a place where robots are deciding whether to apply lethal force or not. Yeah. So for those three reasons, I think autonomous vehicles will have a place. They will certainly extend the capability of future naval platforms, submarines and ships included, but they're not a replacement.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. You just mentioned, this kinetic capability of submarines. I think, we should touch on that briefly. Submarines fire torpedoes, but modern submarines also have land attack capability. I believe there's also anti-air capability that can be fitted to these to the vessels. There's certainly ballistic missiles. Canada is not looking at that.
We're not.
But in terms of like the kinetic capability, my hope is that there is a greater strategy in the Canadian Navy, the Canadian Armed Forces, where there might be some crossover between other platforms and their capabilities. And in my mind, I'm thinking of like the future River-class destroyers will have Tomahawk missiles. I believe that's open sourced. And submarines can launch them as well. So,
absolutely.
Again, you're not in the project office, but what can you say to that?
So I will say that by nature, human beings live on land.
Yes.
I appreciate to be so simplistic,
right.
but we all live on land.
Sure.
So the roles of navies is to impact people living on land, right? So I talked about international rules-based order and free trade and global trade and shipping, but also conflict happens on land as well. So you need to be able to influence that from the sea. How do you influence it from the sea? Well, sinking ships at sea obviously is an influence on it. Land attack is also a very real capability that navies need in today's day and age. It's rightfully recognized in the River-class destroyer. There's a number of long-range missile capabilities being included. The Halifax class has this capability today. A Harpoon missile can do land attack, and we demonstrate that on a fairly routine basis. I would say that all of these capabilities are interesting for the future submarines, not in the project right now. But if you go back to what I'd said earlier about we want an off-the-shelf solution, there is synergies to be had for sure with the armaments on the River-class, but the biggest synergy that we really need is to take a submarine that is designed and operating today and use the same thing. So if it has a different sensor fit, a different weapons fit, a different communications fit, and communications is often raised as, of course, we're going to Canadianize the communications. Radios are all software defined today.
Sure, right.
We can take any radio, use a little bit of ingenuity and modify that radio, and of course the cryptological interfaces will all use Canadian crypto.
Right.
So no, we're good. We want a submarine that's in service with an ally, and we're going to take it as is, where is.
Yeah. I think that's sound thinking, good strategy. As we wrap up here, what are you most looking forward to when it comes to the future class of submarines?
So the Victoria class were always intended as a life extension, capability life extension was the name of the project. I think that for our talented young submariners today that are starting out, I think what I'm most looking forward to is them having a capability, a platform, a hull, a training, a sustainment capability that allows them to be the best they can be in support of Canadian objectives. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to the shiny new submarines. Obviously, I won't be around for it, but I can't wait to see what comes.
Yeah, you and me both, Admiral. I'm excited for the future, excited for the Canadian Submarine Force. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Yeah. Absolute pleasure. Yeah, this has been wonderful, and I hope viewers get a good appreciation.
Me too.
For submarines in Canada. Yes.
Hey, Mom.
And for those of you that are also interested in Canada's current class of submarines, the Victoria class, we have a number of videos on our YouTube channel, and we have a number of interviews on our podcast. So please join us there, and I hope you'll join us for another episode of Go Bold. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thank you, Admiral.
Our thanks to Babcock Canada for their support of this Go Bold episode. To learn more, visit them at babcockcanada.com or on LinkedIn at Babcock Canada Inc.